The curtain is lifted on two more books from Jonathan Hickman in the Dawn of X reboot. Let's talk about them. Hey there, this is Perch. Coming out of the MCM Comic Con, which is a convention in London, there have been two more books announced in the Dawn of X imprint reboot of the X-Men. These two, at least, well, one of the two, firmly starting the connection into the rest of the Marvel Universe proper. Now, Hickman had teased that in the early part of the year, along with Wolverine, we'd see two more titles launching relatively quickly. And both of these books are scheduled to launch in February, as far as we know. We didn't get a complete date on the first one, which is Giant Size X-Men. And this book is going to be kind of a rotating, sort of what actually we heard the adjectiveless X-Men was going to be. And that was where every issue is kind of a standalone one and done. It was clear from the first issue of X-Men that that wasn't going to necessarily be the case. Maybe the stories would be contained, but the subplots and other threads required continual reading. This one feels a little bit more one and done because in each issue of Giant Size X-Men, there will be a couple characters, it's sometimes two, sometimes more characters featured in the book. In the first issue, and the one that was really promoted, it's Jean Grey and Emma Frost. And in addition to new characters, it's going to have a new artist. Now, what's interesting here is the announcement coming out of the show was that Hickman would be writing this series. We know he's writing the first issue. We didn't get a strong commitment that he would keep writing it over time, but we at least know he's going to be doing some of it. We've heard that he's bringing back the title. He's going to be curating the installments. We didn't get a definitive, he's always going to be writing the title, but for the moment, let's assume he is. So for the first issue, we've got Russell Dodderman, who just came off of the War of the Realms series. And like I mentioned, it's Jean Grey and Emma Frost. It's Giant Size X-Men, which, longtime readers will remember is the title, at least the header of the book that introduced Wolverine, Nightcrawler, the all-new, all-different X-Men, Storm and others. So, what is interesting is we've heard it's Giant Size X-Men. We haven't necessarily heard that it's giant sized. Is it called Giant Size and it's actually giant sized, or is it just a regular comic that's called Giant Size X-Men? It's hard to say, but at any rate, every issue will have a new artist. Every issue will focus on different characters. Sometimes, usually pairings from what I've heard, but sometimes more. And I think this is a case where we will see some other writers come into play. I think that has been something that's kind of been inferred at least, but for the moment, this is the first of two brand new books. The second is not an ongoing, it's a mini-series, and it's X-Men Fantastic Four. This harkens back to the 80s when we had an X-Men Fantastic Four series. It was pretty cool. I remember it as being one of the first prestige format books that I saw back then, but by that I mean the heavier paper, not the newsprint. But a really, really cool kind of series. And here we've got Chip Zdarsky teaming up with Terry and Rachel Dodson. So, pretty strong writer-artist teams for both of these books. Unlike actually some of the books that have come before where we had some newer artists or some different writers, here we have some very noteworthy names. I mean, Hickman himself and Russell Dodderman, who, like I said, had the big push from War of the Realms. And in this limited series, we've got Chip Zdarsky, who's pretty well regarded. I mean, he writes good books. To his credit, he writes books that seem to remember and recognize the history of the characters, and he doesn't just invent things as we go. And we've got Terry and Rachel Dodson doing not just covers, but the interior art, the whole shebang. And so that's kind of cool. One other thing I noticed with both of these books is, the interior artist is the cover artist. I mean, hey, who knew? It can be done. So this X-Men Fantastic Four issue is specifically going to pick up on the little moment from House of X #1, where the offer was extended by Cyclops for Franklin Richards to kind of ascend and join the other mutants on Krakoa. And so this whole issue is going to really kind of feature that struggle of what does that mean. And there will definitely be some action. There will be some big moments for Franklin. It's going to play to both the rich history of the FF and the X-Men. So I'm actually pretty excited to get a real good, legit Fantastic Four story. I think Chip Zdarsky did Marvel 2-in-1 back with The Thing and Johnny Storm. He wrote it pretty pitch perfect. And in fact, when Dan Slott came onto the book, when they relaunched, it was kind of a shame because Zdarsky's take on at least half of the family was just really on point. So it'll be nice to see him writing the Fantastic Four again. I think he has a respect for the X-Men and those characters. He's saying that he absolutely loves writing Emma and Professor X and Magneto. So we know that they're going to be a big part of it. Kind of the leadership of Krakoa is a big part of it. So even though this is a mini series, it sounds like this book is going to really be at the heart of Dawn of X and both answer that big question from the first issue of the relaunch, but also lead some insight into how Professor X and Magneto and the mutants in general are going to interact with the rest of the Marvel Universe. I mean, for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, I've been predicting that we're going to get ultimately a X-Men versus Avengers or X-Men versus the rest of Marvel issue at some point. I think there will be a collision point that will come, but so this feels like a step in that direction. So I'm pretty excited about it. They're not giving much away. They're just saying we will see Valeria, we will see Franklin. Obviously, we'll see a lot of conflict about what's going on and where Franklin belongs and how it all fits. But mostly we're being promised some really nice, good art from Terry and Rachel Dodson. We're promised some nice passion from Russell Dauterman, who will be with Matthew Wilson, who has been a long-time collaborator with him on colors. So this is 2 additional books coming out in the Dawn of X banner where they're putting out kind of their best efforts, and I think that's really admirable. So I'll throw this in there as just one more little thing. It's not necessarily X-Men related, but we also did get the announcement that Alex Ross will be curating and providing covers for a 6-issue Marvel Comics anthology series just called Marvel. And so this will be, a couple different creators going into it, just basically bringing some of his favorite artists and people to work on characters he loves with a framing story around it. And we'll see, the creator of Uncle Sam come on it. His collaborator writer, Steve Darnell, to help create the overarching kind of storyline that's going to be seen. Art by Dan Brennerton. I'm sorry. But anyway, we're going to get some pretty interesting art here. Looks like it's going to be a showcase, but more interestingly, and why I'm tacking this onto a video about X-Men, is that this is another case where Marvel is trying a new approach, and it's basically you get somebody who's fairly well regarded, in this case Alex Ross, and you're letting him curate and kind of manage the book as opposed to having it be an editor. You're having Alex Ross do that work. And I think that's pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty telling about where Marvel's head's at and how we're going to see the next 10 years of books. Remember, I've been saying that around the end of 2019, 2020, that we are going to see a shift in how comics are produced and how comics are made. Every 15 to 20 years, this happens. And 15, 20 years ago, we saw the Ultimate Universe. We saw a shift from artists to writers in a pretty big way that went through the industry. And I think this mode of empowering creators, and here we see Jonathan Hickman, a writer, and we see Alex Ross, a painter, both getting empowered up. We're seeing Garth Ennis being empowered to do some work with S.H.I.E.L.D. and with Punisher. We're seeing this different approach where the editor is almost more of an assistant and there's a curator to the line. It's an interesting move, and I think it's something to really keep your eye on. Anyway, 2 new X-Men books. We've got Giant Size X-Men ongoing. We've got X-Men Fantastic Four. And then, of course, we have this new Marvel anthology series. So some interesting stuff coming out of the MCM Comic Con. And it's a neat time. A lot of interesting shifts going on. Anyway, what do you think? Would you pick up any of these books? Do these appeal to you? Go ahead and leave me a comment below. Like, subscribe, share. I am on Twitter at Comic Perch, and I look forward to your questions. Anyway, thanks for listening.